Hello, my name is Barbara Kay, and on behalf of my co-host Susan Pertnoy and the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County, I'd like to welcome you to our program, Mosaic.
We're here today to celebrate the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. We'll be back with our special guests after this brief message.
Through our partner agency programs in Israel, Federation creates opportunities for at-risk youth, families, and seniors. We also provide emergency assistance to the victims of terrorism. Community, like every gift, counts. Together, we can ensure a vibrant Jewish future. Federation and you, changing the world together.
When I was young, I went to Jewish summer camp, traveled to Israel, and participated in leadership development groups. Today I'm teaching my children that being part of the Jewish community helps keep our heritage and traditions alive and vibrant, and can be fulfilling, exciting, and fun.
At the age of 90, I started a second career, delivering meals to homebound seniors. Because I'm a senior myself, I know how tough it can get. If somebody is in trouble and needs help, we need to be there for them. As Jews, it's who we are. It's what we do.
When my family needed help, we turned to the Federation, and they were there for us. How good it was for us to know that we are not alone.
Community, like every gift, counts. Together, we can ensure a vibrant Jewish future. Federation and you, changing the world together.
Welcome back to Mosaic, and welcome back to you, David
great to be back.
Makovsky. You know, it's something to be a Ziegler Foundation scholar. It really is. It's special, but the Washington Institute is also a very special place. You know, I realized, David, it's 30 years since the Washington Institute has been developed. And I think before we discuss the challenges that America and the world is dealing with the Middle East, I think we should give a little bit of a background in regard to what the Washington Institute does and some of its work.
Look, the Washington Institute was really founded based on the idea that the United States, as the world's, then there were two superpowers, but as the leading superpower now, as the sole superpower, you know, has to deal with a very turbulent Middle East. This was true in the 80s when it was founded. It's certainly true today, you know, in the wake of the Arab Spring upheaval. We've known only turbulence. And so what we've tried to do is really assemble a whole team of scholars that are they're regional specialists that are it might be knowing, do you know Tunisia? Do you know Lebanon? Do you know Syria? Do you know Iraq? Do you know Iran? Do you know Israel? And so to try to help our government really understand a region that is so turbulent, so complicated. Do you know its history? Do you know its politics? Do you know its sense of governance? Do you know, and help the United States government to the extent we can in terms of interpreting that, those different countries.
Yeah, you have scholars in all areas across the country, across the world, I should say. In fact, you wrote a book, Myth, Illusionists and with Dennis and Peace.
Yeah, right.
With Dennis Ross, which is exceptional book. I love reading it.
Thank you very much.
You got to read it. You got to write a new book now.
I know. Time for an update.
Yeah.
But no, it's a wonderful place to work, and it's intellectually very stimulating. But as apart from, let's say, a university, our goal is to provide very practical advice to the U.S. government and the different parts of the Middle East. And so that's our job, to provide a realistic understanding of what's going on. And we're not an ivory tower. We're not out to write about the medieval period. We're out to talk about what's now, what can be done now, and that's really the focus of the Washington Institute.
Well, you just came back. I think you were 10 months. You were assistant to Kerry in the Middle East peace process.
Right.
What was that experience like?
Oh, it was thrilling in many ways. It's a pleasure to serve our country, the United States, and you want to serve the cause of peace. But you want to also make sure that you avoid landmines as much as you can, political landmines, policy landmines, and help navigate things. I feel that we brought the parties from here to here, but the Israelis and the Palestinians, but unless you close the gap, it isn't a done deal. And one day the public will find out what it was. I think it was further along than people realize. But besides the peace issue, we had the war in Gaza. It was important that Hamas not emerge having won by using indiscriminate force and bring the Palestinian Authority, give it a foothold back in Gaza after it's been out of it for 7 years.
7 years, yeah.
So anyway, it was very, it was fascinating, and but I believe whoever comes into this afterwards is going to have now a certain baseline to hopefully close those final gaps.
Do you think that the Palestinians themselves want peace?
Look, if you look at the polling data, and I look at a lot of their polls, a majority say they believe there needs to be a two-state solution. The problem is this: when people say, do you want peace or do you want a two-state solution, the terms of what Netanyahu sees as the deal and what Abbas sees, they could both say it's peace, they could both say it's a two-state solution, but the terms for ending it are different. And in the case of the leadership, I think you have a case of where this has gone on for so long, that the leaders become very risk averse. They don't want to get too far out ahead of their publics because they fear the consequences. We're not in the era anymore of Anwar Sadat, Menachem Begin, Yitzhak Rabin, Ariel Sharon even, King Hussein, people who had such confidence that they knew not just what the public wants, but what the public needs, that they were willing to take 5 leaps forward and believe the public would catch up to them. Now it's a very different calculus. It's leaders who want to be maybe a quarter step ahead, but not much more than that. And that's going to lead you in a very different direction.
Yeah, because I'm not sure that the Palestinians have a government that's workable.
Well, look, it's a problem. If people knew what the terms were, you would say, well, a Palestinian leader couldn't do a deal on those terms. He's not getting enough from Netanyahu. And Netanyahu might say, look, I'm not getting enough on certain issues. There's no doubt that there are certain issues. Like, for example, I'll just bring you an example. The issues, 2 issues that were very difficult to resolve. Well, I feel we made big progress on things like the land and the refugees, more than people would realize. On the issue of Jerusalem, it's obviously going to be very emotional. And so...
I don't think that ever could be solved.
Well, maybe not. Abbas will say, how can I be the first lead Palestinian not to have a capital in Jerusalem?
Right.
And Netanyahu would say, well, dividing Jerusalem might be something I can't live with. And on security arrangements, Palestinian might say, look, I can't live in an area that is going to be under Israeli protection. And an Israeli might say, but in the era of the Arab Spring, Arab upheaval, we can't afford to yield the outer perimeter of the Palestinian state because you might smuggle in weapons. And so, you'll have all sorts of compromise ideas on how to bridge that. But ultimately, the regional environment is going to help for, might lead you to dig in. So it's very. Those are the 2 hardest issues.
Yeah, but there are other things, of course. It's very complex, but do the Israelis feel that they have an opportunity for peace? There's a whole situation now with the election,
Right,
and changing of the thinking of the Israelis in regard to this.
right. Well, look, this is going to be a fascinating election. It might not just be a left-right election like we've had in the past. Netanyahu is feeling more attacks that this is more a referendum on his leadership. He may feel the attacks are unfair. Right now, usually he is the front runner, and now for the first time he's not the front runner.
Yeah.
Because the public, wants to some might want to see change. But on the other hand, Netanyahu is a formidable campaigner, and I wouldn't rule him out at all. But the Labor Livni kind of alliance, Tzipi Livni, who's one of the chief negotiators, they've set up a team and they've come together. And also you have Yair Lapid's party, and it's unclear. Ultimately, though, the right bloc of Netanyahu with a guy named Bennett, who is the head of the Jewish Home Party, who says, I want to annex 60% of the West Bank. Those two, combined with some of the ultra-Orthodox, they could be a very formidable bloc that even if Labor and Livni have more votes, in Israel, you got to get to what's called the magic number 61. 61 out of 120 parliamentary seats, what's called the Knesset. And Netanyahu's pathway to 61 traditionally has been easier. And the question is if the center-left is going to be able to get to that, faster. Now, the two swing votes are a fellow named Avigdor Lieberman, who was always reliably on the right side, but now is making noise that he might not be as the foreign minister. And he started his own party. There's another disaffected person from the Likud, from humble Sephardic roots, who did something for Israelis very important. He deregulated the cell phone industry. Not known in America at all. Those are two guys that could have the swing votes. And so you can't just look, if you just look merely at the parties, it's like putting your head in a washing machine. You got to look at the blocks, right block, center left block, and see who's got the numbers.
I got to tell you something. I've looked at the Israeli elections and the government. It is so confusing.
Yeah.
You need a chart.
It keeps us analysts in business for a long time.
Yes. Listen, you're here for a special symposium, which is in honor of also the 30th anniversary.
Sure.
And it's going to be interesting because you have Ambassador Jeffries, who's your partner, who'll be on
my
the second,
colleague.
your colleague. He's going to be on the program at the second half of Mosaic. And so our viewers will get to know him. But what's the largest challenge you think that Israel has at this point?
Look, there's no doubt the Iranian nuclear issue is the key question. It doesn't just affect Israel. It affects also the Arab states, too. There's a traditional enmity between Persians and Arabs, between Shiite Persians and Sunni Arabs. Israel has found that its differences with the Arabs, frankly, have shrunk a lot as they actually quietly, under the table, work together to try to deal with that Iranian nuclear challenge. So I think how that negotiation works out in the next 6 months, if it works out, is the Iranian program in check, is something that Israel's going to be looking at the most at this time, because Iran just impacts the whole region. It impacts Syria. It impacts Lebanon. Lebanon with Hezbollah, Syria with Bashar al-Assad, and those are his allies. So Iran, and you have an Ayatollah Khamenei, who just issued a statement saying 9 ways to annihilate Israel. People might say, "Oh, Israel's paranoid," but Woody Allen said even paranoid people have real enemies, and Iran is a real enemy. Yeah. So this is a negotiation that there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on.
Maybe at the end of the symposium, you'll give something positive to
everybody.
I hope so.
I think there is things that are positive. Like I said, the Israelis and Arab states are quietly talking much more than ever because they have a common threat, and that's the threat of Iran. So, and they also have a common concern, which is militant groups in their area. In the case of Israel, it's Hamas. Yeah. In the case of all these Arab Sunni countries, they have other problems. Now, this is not to negate human rights issues, of course, but what we saw with the Gaza war was fascinating this summer, was that it's the first time that I think the Arab states looked at Hamas through the prism of Israel as a terror group, because they all have problems like Hamas themselves. And so you had a war that went on for 51 days.
I know.
And yet they refused to come to Hamas's assistance. And they were with Israel and saying they should not emerge from this war stronger than they came in. That's a real change.
Yeah, so that is a big challenge and a change, and maybe, hopefully, it'll be a good thing.
I hope so. Let's hope for good
I hope
times.
so.
In
Thank you.
2015, I wish all your viewers a healthy, happy 2015.
Okay, on that note, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with the remainder of the program right after this brief message.
Federation and our overseas partners support the resurgence of Jewish life in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. We also provide humanitarian assistance wherever Jews encounter poverty and crisis. Community, like every gift, counts. Together, we can ensure a vibrant Jewish future. Federation and you, changing the world together.
Welcome back, and a hearty welcome to you, Ambassador Jeffrey.
Thank you, Susan.
You're one of our nation's most well-respected diplomats. You've held a series of highly sensitive positions, both in Washington, D.C. and abroad during the Bush administration and Obama administration. As a matter of fact, you were also the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, as well as the United States ambassador to Iraq. Presently, you are a Philip Solange Distinguished Visiting Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. You're quite an accomplished gentleman, and it's an honor to have you here today. It's very, very stressful in the Middle East. It's filled with chaos and crisis. Why is it such a hotbed?
That's a great question, Susan. It's one that we rack our heads with. The UN DP, which is the UN's development arm, asked a group of Arab intellectuals to review the Arab world, which is most of the Middle East, back in 2002. And they came up with a report that was really shocking about cultural, educational, and intellectual manifestations of these cultures. And they found that on key indices such as translation of books from the outside, Nobel Prizes in this or that, and other things, the region is really, really behind the rest of the world. Now, there are exceptions. The three exceptions are Turkey, Iran, and Israel. And those are also the only three countries in the region that are nation states with a population that identifies with the state. The rest of them, from Pakistan and Afghanistan all the way through the Arab world, are creations of political developments without strong roots as nation states. Rather, people look to particularistic interests, their city, their tribe, their family, or to pan-national movements. They can be political. Pan-Arabism was very active a few decades ago. Or, in particularly these days, they can be Islamic or religious or philosophical. Everything from ISIS, as I call it, this terrorist group that has seized so much of Syria and Iraq, to the Ayatollahs in Iran with their brand of millennialist, religious, radical movements that seek to replace the nation-state system and challenge it, thus in doing so, with a kind of universal system that has its roots in religion but reflects the ambitions of men.
Why does the United States keep being dragged back into the Middle East?
Here's a reason that President Obama cited in 2013, and he keeps on repeating this whenever he justifies putting troops back in where he pulled troops out of, and it's a good summary. First of all, it's our friends and allies. We have a NATO ally, Turkey. We have a country we're very close to, Israel. We have other allies in the Gulf states, obviously Saudi Arabia. We have Jordan. We have Morocco. We have Egypt, very important. We have Pakistan, however troublesome. We have Afghanistan. We have Iraq, where we shed so much blood. Secondly, to keep the flow of hydrocarbons throughout the world. Even though we're much less dependent upon foreign oil and not at all dependent on foreign gas these days as a country, as a global economic system, oil is fungible. We're all dependent upon it. If we want to export products and keep the factories humming in America, we need oil to flow. Thirdly, combating terrorism. I don't have to talk to Americans about that, be it September 11th, be it what we're seeing with ISIS and these beheadings. And finally, stopping the expansion of weapons of mass destruction, most importantly, the Iranian nuclear program. So those are all interests that require us to keep on getting engaged. But the question is, why don't we fix it like we did the Balkans? I mean, the Balkans was talk of the town in foreign policy in the 1990s. Kosovo, Bosnia, massacres, Srebrenica. It isn't anymore. Central America in the 1980s, I know that's before your time, but Ronald Reagan, almost went down over the Iran-Contras. Well, the Contras were, Central American rebels, and this was a big thing. And it is quiet now, too, because we've succeeded. The Middle East is very hard to succeed in. It's sort of a deja vu over and over again. My argument is, while we have to use an economy of force, and we have to be careful not to get overextended there, as we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, but we still are going to have to be engaged. And a good example of the engagement is what we're doing now against ISIS.
Well, speaking of ISIS, could you please explain the fact, obviously ISIS is a tremendous power, but what's the difference between Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda? What makes it so unique? Why is it such a...
Basically, actually, the comparison with Hezbollah is not bad. A colleague of ours at the Washington Institute, Matt Levitt, who's been down here from time to time, has done a book on Hezbollah, and many of their social networking and service providing functions are very similar to what ISIS is trying to do, although ISIS isn't as successful as Hezbollah. All of these movements are transcendental religious extremist movements who believe in using violence to achieve ends that are not compatible with the nation-state system, the UN Charter, and the American view, and most people's view of the world. That said, what is different with ISIS, and what is so interesting is, while it reflects many other movements in the past and in the present, as you just said, it's different because it owns a huge amount of territory, an area probably almost as big as North and South Carolina, combined with 7 to 9 million people. It has large conventional military forces. It has this terrorist capability. It has this ideological religious appeal. It has economic potential with the oil fields it owns or can control. And therefore, it's a different order of magnitude in terms of the challenge than any of the others we've seen.
But how did it become so powerful, and it seems in such a short amount of time? Was the United States aware of the undercurrents of its existence?
To some degree, no, because we, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which was a rump terrorist organization when I left Iraq in 2012, basically spawned ISIS as the Syrian situation degenerated into mass horrific violence by the minority government against essentially the Sunni Arab majority. And so the Al-Qaeda in Iraq people under its leader, al-Baghdadi, who I didn't know him personally, but I knew about him, and he was tracking us and we were tracking him in 2010 to 2012. He saw an opportunity. And so he was able to recruit a tremendous number of fighters and a great deal of money to fight against Assad. And that developed this, this conventional, almost state-like structure. And to take a step back, the reason is a double lack of imagination and attention on the part of the U.S. government. First of all, President Obama, I think he regrets this now, ignored the Syrian conflict. He had a policy towards it that was a check the box, Assad has to go, and we were arming a few people through covert programs, but nothing serious. He basically wasn't interested. When he got a chance not to bomb them over the chemical weapons deal, he took that chance. This was indicative. And then when, and so letting that problem fester, and we normally don't let problems fester in the Middle East because when they fester, they get really bad. This one got really bad not only for the Syrians with Assad, but then it, as I said, spawned. It's the the other father of if the mother is Baghdadi and the Al-Qaeda group in Iraq, the father is the Assad regime, which actually had encouraged terrorists of this ilk because they wanted to portray themselves as the shield against international terrorists. So they were happy to see these guys fight them. They're not now because they're so powerful, but they were happy. And then we missed it. When ISIS came roaring back into Iraq in January of this year and seized the iconic town of Fallujah, where we lost 100 Marines and Army troops, taking in November of 2004. They basically showed that they were back big time. The administration was warned, including by some of my friends in the administration, publicly. There were congressional hearings even before then, in November and December of 2013, and the president opted not to do anything.
Which is horrific. So now, what, in your opinion, how can we defeat or destroy them?
Well, the goal, first of all, is correct, to defeat them. Given what's passed before, I'm actually quite surprised pleasantly by the actions that the Obama administration and the U.S. military have taken. First of all, they, in June, when I saw how serious this was, he sent 1,500 troops back in. He opened the door to airstrikes, but he leveraged them to get rid of the Maliki government, which was a major reason for the rise of ISIS. Perhaps the fairy godmother of this thing was the Maliki government. And then when ISIS lurched forward again against the Kurds in August at Sinjar Mountain, with all the Yazidis being surrounded and massacred, the president started an air campaign. I think it could be conducted more aggressively, but we're seeing real successes right now. The problem is, where are we going to get the ground troops to go in and dig these people out? That's going to take more time, but we're in a much better place than we were a few months ago. So I think we're seeing the end of the beginning, but we're not seeing the end.
We have a few moments left. What is your prognosis for the future?
I think we will defeat ISIS. I don't think time is on our side as much as the administration. I want to see this faster, and the reason is, Susan, that so many other things can bubble up in the Middle East. We can have another outburst of violence between the Israelis and the Palestinians. That's a troubling situation right now. You have Egypt, a big question mark. Pakistan, a big question mark. Afghanistan, will we pull our troops out and what will happen? Iran, the negotiations have failed. Thus, we have a term in the military, servicing the targets, where we are trained to start hitting them early and hard, because there are going to be more of them coming at you. There are going to be more crises like Syria and like ISIS. We've got to take them and get rid of them so we're ready for the next one.
On that note, we must end. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You know, Susan, I think it's wonderful that Mosaic gives us an opportunity to bring challenges to our viewers that I'm sure concern them as they do the rest of the world.
It's a wonderful opportunity.
Yes, and they were terrific.
They were.
Thank you so much for being with us. Be with us again next week when we have another look into the Jewish world. Goodbye from Mosaic.